In this video, we're going to be talking about the most important and most powerful thing you need to do in order to buy a house, unless you have all cash. All cash is great, but in this case, assuming you have to get a loan, this is the video you need to listen to, because without it, you're not going to be buying a house, especially in this market. So joining me today is Austin Foss with Mutual of Omaha Mortgage. Thank you again, Austin, for joining us. Let's talk about the lender pre-approval letter. Got to talk about that one.
You gotta have it. You gotta have it. And thank you so much for having me back. I always appreciate being welcomed back by your team and your family, as it turns out.
Yes.
Yeah. So the pre-approval is the most important part of the buying process, because without a pre-approval, you're not going to be able to. I mean, you can write as many offers as you want to, but you're never going to get one accepted. Because
Absolutely.
anywhere in Texas, really anywhere in the country for the most part, the seller wants to know that you as a buyer are qualified and that your loan is going to be approved by the lender. And so the seller has no way of knowing that unless you have a pre-approval letter from the lender who you are going to get the loan through.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. From a realtor standpoint, when we represent the seller, if you don't include a lender letter, we're going to kind of put that offer to the side and say, well, we'll just wait till you get us that letter. So I mean, it's especially in this market, and really it is a very powerful tool. You have to look at it as a tool, because the seller's looking at that, and so many important elements to that. So, let's just say we're talking to our buyers right now. What do they need to do in order to get, this coveted lender pre-approval letter?
Sure. And there's two different terms when it comes to that letter that we're discussing. There's a pre-qualification and there's a pre-approval. I actually have a separate video that we will attach down below if you want to take a look at it. It's about 1.5 minutes long, kind of explains the difference.
Excellent.
But for those of you that are here, the pre-qualification means that you've submitted your information to the lender through completing an application, either verbally, electronically. You can do it face-to-face, whichever route you want to go. Naturally, everything is mostly done either electronically through an online application of some sort, or just over the phone through almost like an interview type deal. The application for us takes 5 to 7 minutes. The phone application takes maybe 7 to 10 minutes. So, that's information such as where do you work? How long have you worked there? What's your pay structure? Salary, commission, hourly, self-employed. What do you have available for a down payment? What's your date of birth? And so, things like that. That's the information that we actually need to determine if you're going to be approved for the loan. So what the pre-qualification is you have submitted that information to the lender, like I said, verbally or electronically, whichever method, but you don't have any sort of documentation to back it up. That's where the pre-approval comes in. So the pre-approval letter, a lot of times will state if the information has been verified, and that's done through bank statements for your assets, W-2s and pay stubs for your income, credit report for your credit, maybe tax returns, maybe mortgage statements. It just, from there, it all depends on your specific scenario. But the pre-approval means that information has been verified, automated underwriting has been run, and there's been an approval from the automated underwriting system. So the pre-approval is much more stronger than the pre-qual, because let's be honest, somebody could come in and tell me, hey, I make $50,000 a month at my job, and then we get the documentation in, and it's they make $50,000 for the year. Well, that's a much different thing for approving. So many times sellers are going to want to see that the information that you've provided as the buyer has been verified, rather than just provided, verbally or electronically.
Wow. Yeah. So sounds like the more information you can provide up front on that loan application, the more powerful that letter is that you're sending along with your offer. And I know in past conversations, we've talked about how important just absolute complete honesty is on that application.
Yeah.
So kind of go into that with us a little bit. I know, we've talked about the Cavers report and how, just kind of like trust your lender that it is going to come up.
Right. No, you're 100% right. And things are going to come up because, truth be told, you're being lent, I think, a
Who
couple,
knows?
$100,000 most likely to purchase this home. And,
Hmm.
the bank wants to make sure, it's not the big bad bank. It's just like you, if you're making an investment, you want to make sure that what you're investing in is right. You want to make sure that it's a sound investment. Well, the bank wants to
Definitely.
do the same thing.
Hmm.
They want to make sure that you as a person are a sound investment away, not to dehumanize or anything like that, but
Hmm.
um, because of that, there's going to be extra checks that are done. And, if you have something on your credit or you have something, some sort of foreclosure or a bankruptcy, and you just choose not to disclose that, well, number one, that means that your application was essentially invalid because those are questions that are
Yeah.
asked.
Hmm.
And so that could be grounds for denial or mortgage fraud or what have you. And number two is just going to come up. So a good loan officer is going to be asking those questions up front
Hmm.
because in
Hmm.
raw reality, it's way
Definitely.
easier to give information before you're on the clock of being under contract, right? Because if you're under
Yes.
contract and these questions are coming up, it's a mad dash to get the answers
Hmm.
before the appraisal comes back or before the clear close or whatever that may look like. That's why it's important to get the information in up front and to be thorough up front because then once you're under contract, you may only need to provide like updated pay stubs to show you're still employed or updated bank statement to show earnest money or things like that. It's not this laundry list of items that comes back from underwriting because you have a complete, what we call a complete file up front.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, it's super important to be thorough and to be working with somebody who asks the right questions up front to put you as the buyer in the best program and in the best position to get that loan approved. I mean, in as short a time as possible.
Right. So just for our viewers out there, again, which one is better, the pre-approval or the pre-qualify?
Pre-approval, you are significantly more likely to
Got
get
it.
the offer accepted if you have the pre-approval.
So just think out there, A plus, pre-approval, okay?
Hmm.
Yeah, and I know that representing sellers, we've seen things go wrong at the last minute due to buyers that, they forgot or they didn't think it mattered, or they didn't add it. And the thing that as buyers, the thing you have to remember is like you're spending money here. You're spending on the option period, you're spending on the inspection, on the appraisal.
Yeah,
And then if it ends up, it doesn't close because you forgot to put
yeah.
something on there, ouch, you just out probably $1,000, at least.
That's exactly right. And that's why it's important to work with somebody who is going to ask you these questions up front.
Hmm.
It's super convenient to just go and put your information into somewhere and get a pre-qualification in 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever
Right.
that looks like. But like you just said, you're putting money on the line when you go under contract.
Hmm.
You could be putting up thousands and thousands of dollars if you just went online and filled out some form and didn't actually get into the information, that money could just be gone because you just
Yeah.
didn't take the time up front that you needed to take. So, and by all means, this isn't one of those where it's like it's a 2 week process or something like that. It's a
Sure. Sure.
For our team, it's a you fill out the application, we'll go over it with a fine tooth comb, ask any questions that are going to be asked by underwriting anyways.
Hmm.
Because we don't have any interest in just extracting your personal info for our personal gain.
Right. Right.
Raw reality, like we don't really care on a personal level. We care about getting the information that's needed to get the loan approved. And so it's important to go into that information with somebody up front rather than, like I said, once you're on the clock of being under contract or having the underwriter find out about it, because then it's much harder to say, oh, well, it's just this. If underwriting finds it out, then, their job is to protect the bank. And
Right.
as
Absolutely.
far as that goes, and so if they're hit with something and then they're questioning it, it's much harder if you as the buyer are like, kind of on the defensive or what have you.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, that makes perfect sense. So, and I think it's obviously that pre-approval letter, it makes your offer more powerful and it protects you. Um, okay, back in the day, right? Because we've been doing this since 2007. Back in the day, an option fee might be like $50, and you're basically saying, "Hey, Mr. Seller, will you give me a week? I'll give you
Yeah.
this option fee, right? Well, nowadays in this market, it's not at all uncommon to see option fees for like $700, $800. You
Hmm.
don't get that money back. If the sale falls through, it's gone. So, so the
Yeah,
devil is definitely in the details.
you typically got what, like 3 days to get the earnest money in. You don't have
Yeah,
like weeks to just sit on it and stew and think about it. It's like no, you got to make it
exactly.
happen.
Yeah, yeah. And there are definitely situations where you're going to lose your earnest money as well. And so that we're seeing that earnest money amount so much higher too. So yeah, definitely I think you and I are both on the same page saying, hey, future buyers, take the time to put the detail into that loan application for sure.
And answer the questions. Just answer them as they come along. Again, if
Hmm.
it's not necessary, we're not going to ask unless we're like just
Oh,
trying to get to know you on a personal level, right? But
right,
if it's anything related to the loan, we're asking it because it needs to be answered.
right. Even is down to like the specifics of child support,
Hmm.
right? Because even that can go wrong.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of follow-up questions that will be asked at some point. So, like I said, it's better to get them asked up front. Um, to make sure that you've got everything, all your ducks in a row, and whatnot, because a good loan officer will be able to know, like, okay, based on this information, it should be good, but there's this detail that prevents this income from being used, this child support income or something like that. So there's just guidelines that have to be followed and things like that. So
Yeah, so if somebody's using child support as income, is there like a limit in terms of years where they can no longer use that as
yep,
income?
yep. So there's a 3-year continuance. So a lot of times, if there's income such as child support, or some other sort of spousal support, alimony, or other certain types, like a disability, for example, is that income scheduled to continue for 3 years?
Oh,
Um,
okay, 3 years. Okay.
those 3 years. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, if you just put, oh well, I receive 1,200 a month in child support. Well, the next question should be, how long is that scheduled to continue, and how old is the child? Like that is
Yeah.
if I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to somebody and I take an application, that is the next question every time. Oh, I
Oh,
received X in child
excellent.
support. Okay, how old is the child, or how old are the children? Because that's
Yeah.
important. You know,
Yeah.
it, it,
Yeah. It sounds like it. And again, as the buyer, you have so much on the line.
yeah, exactly.
So tell me, self-employed, does it take a lot longer to get, either pre-qual or pre-approval letter when you're self-employed?
Yeah, so self-employed is different. It's not one where a lot of people think that there's different terms. If you're self-employed, your interest rate's higher, or your down payment's higher, or stuff like that. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
case.
Oh, okay.
A loan is a loan. A conventional loan is a conventional loan. A FHA is an FHA, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times with self-employed individuals, it's just there's a little bit of extra documentation because it's a different pay structure. You don't go to work for 40 hours a week and make the same amount per hour every single
Right.
week. You don't
Mm-hmm.
receive a pay stub every 15th and 30th or first and whatever that looks like. It's a
Right.
little different. You are the boss of your own income. And so with self-employed borrowers, um, an important thing to remember is that your net income is what's considered your income. So, you could have 600,000 in gross
Mm-hmm.
income in sales or whatever that looks like for your specific business. But if you deduct $575,000 of income because you
Right. Mm-hmm.
taxes, well, you've got 25 grand of income for that year. And that's what's used to qualify. So, sometimes there's, a lot of time there's COVID overlays, just like with everything else in the world. So a lot of maybe like a profit and loss statement to show that the business is still profitable, that the income is still on track. But yeah, the tax returns are a big part of it, to for that, just because it's a different pay structure. And if you
Right.
write off everything, there's like bank statement programs and things like that. That's a whole different conversation that I'm not even going to get into.
Got
Um,
it. Got it. I know that's a big one because it is. I know for us personally, we needed a few years under our belt of being self-employed before
mhm.
we could think about, getting any kind of loan. And yeah, that's what they would tell us. Hey, we just want to see consistency in income,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Yep, that's true. So, one question that I have a lot is if somebody's getting, pre-qualified or pre-approved, how do you know what dollar amount they can be pre-approved for if you don't know if there's going to be, a PID or a MUD or an HOA. How can you say, okay, you're approved for this dollar amount? What if it ends up being like way off because of the PID and the MUD and so forth?
Absolutely. And those contribute to what your taxes may be, as far as that goes. So it's important
Okay.
to talk to somebody who kind of has an idea of what the general tax rate for that area is, because with the mortgage, what you're qualifying for is a specific monthly payment. And so
Hmm.
what is done is we take your income, look at it versus your liabilities plus what that new mortgage payment is going to be. So the homeowners insurance, the property taxes, uh, HOA dues, those all play a factor into what that mortgage payment is going to be. So um, a lot of times if I'm talking to somebody and I have somebody I can think of specifically who was deciding between purchasing in Houston versus purchasing in San Antonio. I was like, hey, you gotta tell me,
Hmm.
because the taxes in Houston are different than San Antonio. Insurance is different in Houston and San Antonio because of hurricanes and thunderstorms and all that stuff. So those all play a huge factor in what you can qualify for. Because again, the taxes are going to look a lot different for,
Sure.
like you said, these these different cities, these different specific little communities, let's say.
Hmm. Hmm.
So those all play a huge factor. So when you're getting pre-qualified up front, you don't have to say, okay, I'm purchasing in the Bonnet community out in Grand Prairie, and I'm purchasing
Right.
on this street. You don't have to be that specific, right? But you
Hmm.
want to be able to say like, okay, I'm looking in the DFW Metroplex, because there's typically not such a massive variance in tax rates, let's say, because that's usually the big factor, that you'll go from approved to not approved. And if it's one where you're purchasing like at the very top of your budget, in
Ah,
terms of your debt
yes.
to income, then that's one that's really important to say, hey, I'm going to go look at these specific properties. Do these work with me qualifying, with the taxes or with the insurance or stuff like that? That's an important conversation to have with your lender. Do
So it
you have room
almost
to go up? Yeah.
so it almost sounds like you could almost go on a case by case basis, especially if like the particular neighborhood has like the HOA or the PID or the MUD. It might almost be better before you even submit the offer. Is what it
Yeah,
sounds
I,
like.
I, I tell people a lot of times, if they're pushing their debt to income ratio, meaning they're pushing their
Hmm.
max allowable loan amount, send me the address that you're going to go look at before you actually go and look at it, because then I can plug in taxes, a general estimate for insurance as far as that goes. I'm not going to go bother my homeowner's insurance guy every single time they want, as far as
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Generally, I've done enough transactions in different parts of the state that I have an idea of what homeowners insurance will come in at. It could be a
Hmm.
one-off
Hmm.
where, oh, this roof is terrible and just whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But apart from that, it's important, if you're pushing that ratio, to send me the address, because what if taxes are lower but there is this massive HOA? Well, that has to be
Right.
factored in. What if taxes are higher? That has to be factored in too. And again, it's going to come up. So.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and I know this is just another reason that we really encourage our buyers to not use the big banks that have the 1-800 numbers or, just an extension, because sometimes this stuff is by the minute. Like you
Mhm.
may find a house you love with a multiple offer deadline at 5 o'clock, and you need to know what you can offer, you
Yeah,
know? And if you've got a 1-800 number, and maybe even worse, like not even a person assigned to it, how are you going to get that information?
you're not.
You know? So I know we've talked about this before, and you and I are on the same page, how we really don't recommend that you use the bank that you bank with. We really don't recommend that you use them as a lender, because usually they're good at one thing. They're good at banking.
Mhm. Mhm.
Usually the mortgage part, the mortgage piece, you're better off going with someone that specializes in the mortgage piece, and where you can get a single human being,
Right.
who you're going to be able to contact, because yeah, you are going to need them in the minute.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And a
yeah.
lot of times the people who like let's say Wells Fargo, for example, just because I bank with them,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Wells
Hmm.
Fargo banking is an entirely different group from Wells Fargo mortgages, and it's all under the same umbrella, but it's not the same thing. It's really the only difference is like, you know, like I said, it's not the same thing as far as that goes. So it's important to be working with somebody who specializes in mortgages, right?
Right. The
Is a
specialization.
mortgage
Yeah.
loan officer. It's what they do every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I do, I do mortgages, I do insurance, I do this, I do that. Like, that's almost like a jack of all trades, master of none type scenario.
Right. Right.
You don't want that
And
when you've got earnest money on the line, like we said.
And I know many, many years ago, we tried to refinance our house, our personal house, with BBVA, which they don't exist anymore, but that was, who we banked with at the time. And they literally had no one assigned to mortgages except like one person that covered the entire region. And, we're in Dallas, Fort Worth. Okay, so that region is pretty big.
Yeah.
And we just ultimately gave up because I mean, we couldn't get a hold of the person. Here this one person is managing all mortgages. It's
Hmm.
because that was the back seat for them. That wasn't what their focus was. So
I would not want to be that person. That's for sure. Gosh,
I
that's
know, man. It's like you talk about stress. Well, kind of wrapping this up here, but one question that I have is how can buyers, is there any strategy where buyers can make, their lender letter powerful, more persuasive? Are there any, I know I have a few ideas of what we do, but just kind of from your standpoint, how do they make it the most powerful thing they can make it?
so. I think the important thing is, like we said, that pre-approval is the important one because there's depending on different lenders have a different pre-approval letter, but it should always show on there if the information has been verified, as far as that goes. So being able to put on there, yes, my income has been verified, my credit has been verified. A lot of times a pre-approval letter won't say like, yes, we have gathered W-2s and we have gathered tax returns,
Mm,
because the seller doesn't actually get to know that information. They don't get to know what kind of employment you have. They just get to know, is this loan going to go through or not? And if we can state that your information has been verified, then that goes a long way towards, showing that showing that the loan's going to go through, because that's really what the seller cares about in the end. You can offer
yeah,
$600,000 above anybody else, but if your loan doesn't close, then the seller doesn't get any money.
that's
Um,
what I always tell my sellers. The biggest thing you have to lose is time. You're just sitting there and then it falls through.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So, I think that's important is having a good, strong offer letter. You also want to work with somebody who is going to be there to answer questions from the listing agent that may come up. A lot of times
Yeah.
when they know if y'all are, I'm sure if you're selling a property and you
Hmm.
receive a couple of offers, you're probably going to either research that lender online,
Absolutely.
um,
Hmm.
or you're going to call that lender
We do
and
both.
ask about the viability of this person as a borrower. You want to work with somebody who's going to be going to bat for you, and you want to work with somebody who is going to be there to answer those questions. I mean, I was out of the country on vacation this past week and still fielding calls from buyers who are putting in offers, because that's important. That may be what pushes it over the line is
Yeah.
having your lender say, hey, here's what we've done for you, as for my client. We've gathered X, Y, and Z. Again, not getting into personal info. We've
Sure.
verified all this information. They are a very strong buyer. Your sellers would be very lucky to choose them. Does it always work? No, of course not.
So
But
I know like what
anything
we
you can do.
do. Yeah, I mean, what we do is when we're representing the seller is, we send over a list of questions to the lender. Well, first of all, when we get an offer, we look up the ratings of that lender. And also what's really important to us is how big they are. Are they a small, brand new company that's really tiny, or, we want to know, hey, it's big. I know that's one of the reasons we like Mutual of Omaha, $1 billion company. Um, anyway, and what we do is we're like, hey, Mr. Lender, just tell us what you can. Here's some questions we have
Yep.
other than private, and they do. They'll come back and they'll tell us, and that is very helpful for us to communicate, to our seller.
And you do. That's
So
how we met. Is we were the lender on a property that y'all were listing, and I still remember those questions coming to us. So
that's hilarious.
It's good. I
Wow.
like
Like
that. I love that. I love that because it shows that you are interested in your client's closing, and it's one of those things where those questions should be asked. Just
yeah,
like
yeah.
questions will be asked of you as the buyer to make sure again that your loan closes.
And I will say that's kind of like the school of hard knocks because we've been doing this since 2007 and just over the years, oh, this loan fell through because of this. And we're like, okay, from now on, we're going to ask that question.
You learn as you
And
go along.
like, we do. And so we would make every time I'd be like, oh, add to the list, add to the list.
Mhm.
We're going to ask about, like, the child support was one thing that we were like, oh, add to the list. And if they can't tell us, that's okay. But at least let's try. At least
Yeah,
let's ask,
of course.
Um, yeah, because it's just the biggest bummer when you're under contract, you represent the seller, and then it all falls through. It's like
Mhm.
starting
out,
over
out of
again.
nowhere, out of nowhere,
Hmm.
especially. There's always going to be some things that maybe are out of the lender's control, property or something like
Hmm.
that, or a borrower gets laid off, and those are
Right.
things that it's just like, hey, like, what are you going to do? Like, borrower got laid off 2 weeks before closing. Like, sorry, like I couldn't tell you that they were going to get fired or what have you.
Right. Right.
But generally there's information that will kind of say like, hey, this is good to go, and me as the lender, I'm literally sitting here with the check on my desk waiting to write it for them to get under contract, or hey, there's this and this, so on and so forth. So again, it's important to work with somebody who actually knows the information well enough to be able to honestly and thoroughly answer that question to go to bat for you.
Right. So really, you as the buyer, give all the information you can, be specific, think really hard, go back over your past, and then use a lender who is communicative and responsive. And those are things that are just going to give and get the pre-approval letter. Remember the difference: pre-approval letter is A plus,
Yeah.
pre-qualification letter leaves questions. Okay, so that's your cue. So that's what you want to remember when you're trying to get that pre-approval letter, not pre-qual, because pre-qual leaves questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so to give it the most muscle, for sure. And another thing that sellers really look for is we like to see the biggest cash down payment possible, right? And so when we have high cash down payment, we encourage our buyers, hey, go ahead and send your proof of funds at the same time. you
Hmm.
know so those are things that will just give that offer muscle. And that's, in this market, it's so competitive. I know you and I were just talking about inventory, and it is just challenging right now.
Yeah.
So you want to go in best foot forward, as powerful of a pre-approval letter as you can come up with.
Yeah, and every situation is going to be different. Every offer is going to be different. So when you always want to work with a realtor, what have you, who is going to look at your specific situation, chat with the lender. Hey, does this person need closing cost assistance? Is this their max purchase price? Can they go a little bit higher in the price to maybe offset something else, as far as that goes? So every loan is going to be a little bit different. Every offer is going to be a little bit different. So you always want to work with somebody who has your best interest in mind, who is going to write the type of offer that's going to get accepted. Because what you think as the buyer may be the strongest, i.e., just highest purchase price, may not
Hmm.
be the best offer for that
This is
specific
true.
seller or that specific scenario.
Completely true. Well, guys, I hope this was helpful. FAQ session on, pre-approval letters. Austin, in closing, anything else that, you want to throw in there?
Um, just be, like I said, just be thorough. I think that's the big
Mhm.
one. Is just answer questions, answer them in a timely manner. Because again, our goal is not to extract information that's not necessary. Our goal is to get your loan closed and
Right.
get you into the house, and as far as that goes. So again, um, we just ask that our questions get answered, and that
Got
way,
it.
when they're answered, we don't have to think twice about it. We just move on.
Right, right. Take the time, be thorough, be honest.
Yep. Good. It's a
Absolutely.
good moral for life. So
Yeah, I guess
what
so.
applies for life also applies for mortgages, as it turns out.
That's true. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. And you know what? Hopefully, doing some more in the future. You'll see us again, and we'll get some more of your questions answered. So, Austin, thanks again for joining us, and I think we'll go ahead and call it a day.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to next time.
Yep, yep. All right. Thanks.